they record it and then they play it. You know, I was a little surprised after given so that all Daf has so much, you know. Well, I don't know if we're on a high level.
The guy decides to share and he records it, and later on in the day, he listens to it. It's another Madrega.
Okay. A year of learning, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, Toby Paris, Sarah Tova, Bad Yisrael Dove in her memory. Charlie Gelfenstein and Sam Levine in memory of Ramona Levine, Rachel Mata Bat Asher, friends of Nina Monester, Nechama Hasna Bad Yitzchak Aharon. Many friends of Stephen Vigdor, Lezecher Nishmat Simcha Melech Memeir Leib Halevi. Friends of Marcy Kurtz in memory of her great niece, Leah Bracha Bas Rivka. Isaac and Evelyn Blachor in memory of his sister, Vivian Kestenbaum, Chaya Rachel Bas Issa. A month of learning by Carol and Josh Sanborn in memory of her mother, Yitabat Nachman Ben Yamin. Mel and Haran Haller in memory of his brother, Yaakov Ben Avraham. Perry and Jill Meltzer in memory of his father, David Ben Fishel Halevi, and her mother, Bela Bas Avraham. A week of learning by Judy Iger in memory of her father, Eliyahu Ben Yosef Mordechai. May Hashem is having the Leah, Crank Rafia, Velti Yeshua Shem Matzliah, Chol B'nai Yisrael, a good Gaben Shtiar.
Amen.
Okay.
Amen.
All right. A reminder, everybody, that 4:30 on Thursday, okay, at Century Grill is the Siyum. Okay. Yeah.
Let him go someplace else. Don't tell him.
Right, and make sure you have as of Friday morning Gemara Kesubos. All right. All right. Today we're going to float through the Gemara. Why do I say that? Because when you see all the stories, it's mostly Agadita. Okay. Okay. Well, it depends. I wouldn't want to be stuck in the Mediterranean.
No.
Okay. That's where I thought it took place. Okay. And all right. But the next time you take a cruise, this is the appropriate piece of Gemara to learn if you ever take a cruise, right? Okay. I want to quickly start off on the bottom of Kuf Kaf Amud Beis, the very bottom. Amar Rav Hoshaya, says Rav Hashin, Chayshin and Shema Haruach Milabato. Okay, we said there that if the person had their two simanim cut,
right.
Okay, maybe it was the fact that the wind aggravated it. Inami shema'ihu kirev mitato. Okay, and the Gemara doesn't spell that out, but one of the Parushim says perhaps by the person's own convulsions.
Right.
Okay, that's what caused his death. All right, and that's what caused the blood flow, and as a result, that person who did the cutting, okay, the wounding, would not be chayav galus in that case, right? Because they wouldn't be considered chayav on the misa.
But the convulsions are normal.
That's what we're going to get to this morning. That's how we're going to start off the Gemara. Okay?
So many times when the Gemara says a person is not chayav galus, it means it could be chayav misa.
That could be. It could be. Okay, it's a lot of Gemara today, but as I said, it's basically a lot of it is a Gadita. Okay, but let's start off. So the Gemara wants to know my Beinayu. We're on the top of Kuf Kaf Aleph. Okay, what's the difference between the two situations? Asks the Gemara. Okay, Deshachte Bebeita Deshaisha, that he slaughtered her, he cut it. He cut his two simanim in a house of marble. In other words, it was totally closed in, and there's so no wind. Exactly, Ruven, would be there. Upirchis, and he had convulsions. Inami, or perhaps the shachte bebara velo pirchis, or perhaps that he cut him outdoors, where there would be a wind velo pirchis, but he did not have any convulsions. Okay, Rabbi Yehuda Omer says, Rabbi Yehuda, lo kol v'chule. Right? Remember that Rabbi Yehuda's opinion was, okay, that not every man, place, or time was exactly the same. Okay, so what happens? So they asked him as follows: Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba l'kula palig or l'chumra palig? Is Rabbi Yehuda's comment when he challenges it, is it to be more stringent or to be more lenient? Right? Tashma, listen to the following Braita. Dahahu Gavra de Tava Bekarmi. There was a certain man who drowned in the town of Karmi, Va'askuhu Abe Hedya, and they pulled out the body by the neighboring town of Behedya. The Batar Tzlat Yomi, and it was after 3 days. Ve'insaba Rav Dimi min Hardeya leDebatayu. And even though it was after 3 days, where our Mishnah said that you could not rely on Simani, right? Nevertheless, Rav Dimi from Nehardeya permitted his wife to marry. Okay? V'tu, and furthermore, Ahu Gavra da'atba degleit. There was a certain man who drowned in the Tigris River. Va'askuhu agishra de Shavis Tana. And they pulled him out, okay, by the bridge on the, I guess, a tributary of the Shavis Tana River. V'insaba Rava leDebetayu apuma de Shushbane. Okay, and Rava, however, allowed his wife to marry based on the testimony of somebody in the neighborhood, one of his acquaintances there in town. The Batar Chamsha Yome, and that was even after 5 days. So we have 2 stories quickly that tell us maybe Rabbi Yehuda ben Batera was saying no, that the 3-day limit is not a valid statement.
It depends on the situation.
Right.
But it
So
could
what
be even
happens?
longer.
Right.
That would be
Iyam,
Lakur.
right. So now the Gemara picks up. Iyamart b'shlema lekula palig. If you're going to say that Rabbi Yehuda ben Batera's statement is to provide for a leniency, and that's where the argument is. In Huda Avid ka Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba. Then these 2 examples show that they're acting exactly like the kula of Rabbi Yehuda ben Batera. Okay, Ella, Iyamart l'chumra pali. If you're going to say that he's arguing for chumra, for more stringency, inhu David kaman. These 2 examples, according to whom are they acting? Shani Maya. So we say here the water is different. Ditsamte, because it contracts the body. But wait a second, says the Gemara. V'ha'amart shmaya marzug maka. But didn't we say in our Mishnah that water aggravates the wound? Hanimili heicha maka. Here we're talking about a situation where there is a clear wound. About heicha daleka maka mitzmat samit. But where there is no clear example of a wound, the water, then what happens? It becomes, it shrinks a little bit. Vahani mili, dechi aske chasya b'shate. And this also occurs that at the time that they remove the body, they examine it. Aval ishtai. But if for some reason the body, they waited after removal of the body to examine it, mitpach tafche, then the body becomes bloated, okay, and it changes the simanim of the body. Okay? New Mishnah, matnitin. Nafal mayim bein she'ein lahem sof, bein, right, nafal mayim bein she'yesh lahem sof. The person fell into water where it's limited. Okay, in other words, we're going to see the Gemara is going to define what do we mean shortly by Mayim Sheyesh Bahem Sof as something where you can look in all directions and see all the shores of the body. Okay, a lot like most of the little lakes we have here in the Century Village. Okay, all right. Bein she'en lehem so versus water that does not seem to have an end. I'll say that you can't see the shore. And the Gemara ultimately is going to give us an Agadata where there's a question of definition on that. Okay? What happens? Okay? In that situation, according to this Mishnah, regardless of what the extent of the body of water is, Ishto Asura Amar Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir holds that in either case, the wife is prohibited. Okay, so what happens now? We start. We had an incident where somebody fell into a cistern, Halabor Hagadol, a large cistern. And it took him 3 days to climb up out of the cistern. Right? Amar Rabbi Yossi, says Rabbi Yossi, Maaseh Besuma, Sheirad Litbol B'Ma'ara. We have an incident where a blind person went to go to immerse, okay, in a cave, right? V'yarad Moshcho Acharav, and his guide also went in after him. V'shahu Kadesh Tetzei Nafsham, and the situation was that others outside waited long enough time that he could have died. Vehesiu et nishoteim, and they married off their wives. Veshuv maaseh ba'asya, and furthermore, an incident occurred in Asya, okay, which could be Asia Minor. Be'echad sheshal shaluhu liyam, in a situation where they lowered a person into the sea. Velo alta biadam el raglo, and when they pulled up the body, which was attached to a rope, all they found was the leg. Right? Amru chachamim, and the sages said in regard to that situation, min ha'arkuva lamala. Remember, we saw this the other day. Okay, from the kneecap and above, tinaseh, a woman would be able to marry. Min ha'arkuva lamata, lo tinaseh, but from the kneecap below, all right, the possibility is that he could survive, all right, and she cannot marry. Right? Reminded me of these stories recently of shark attacks here on the Florida coast. Okay, yeah, they are more up north. Right? Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan, says the bride. Yeah.
At the point of ain't so double. Majority of people in this situation, if 100 people, 99 people die, one survives, the wife can't marry, I gotta go according to the majority. In this particular, I don't follow this kid too carefully.
Okay.
You understand what I'm trying to say?
Let's rephrase your question. Sid's question is, if somebody goes into the water and the majority of people are able to come out of the water.
I didn't say that.
No, he said the reverse. The majority don't come out. So are we afraid that?
No, I was going to say the opposite. That's why.
No, that's not what he's asking.
Okay, if the majority come up, why don't we hold by the majority that we?
Because that's the norm.
That's the norm. That's why the story goes. The fact is, we're going to see later on in the Gemara, we're going to take a specific example of a body of water, and the question is, how do we define that body of water?
So you might as well say the same thing what I'm saying. The majority of people come out, one doesn't.
We'll
It's the
see.
same thing, really.
Let's wait. We'll get to that Gemara, and then we'll focus on your question. Okay. All right. So what happens is the Gemara. Tana Rabbanan says a Braita. Nafal mayim bein sheyesh lehem sof. Watch what the mission, watch what the Breita says. A person falls into water, right? Bein sheyesh lehem sof, regardless of whether it has limitations. In other words, as we're going to define shortly, you can see all the shorelines. Bein she'ein lehem sof, or you cannot see the shorelines. Ishto asura divrei Rabbi Meir. Either case, the wife is forbidden to be married, according to Rabbi Meir. But the sages say, Mayim sheyesh lehem sof, water that has boundaries, ishto muteret, his wife is permitted to marry. All right? V'she'ein lehem sof, but the water that does not have boundaries, ishto asura, the wife is prohibited. So the Gemara asks, Hey Chidami, under what circumstances are we talking about? So here we go, Sid. Mayim sheyesh lehem sof. How do we define, I'm going to say, water that has sof, that has limitations? Amar Abaye, he tells us, Kol she'omed v'ro'eh me'arba ruchotav. One who can stand on one side of the body of the water and look in all four directions. In other words, you can see the shoreline of that body wherever you look. Okay? Hahu, all right? And now we have a story, okay, to clarify Abaye's suggestion. Hahu Gavra, there was a certain man, the Tava Ba'agma de Samke, and he drowned in the Agma of Samke. Now, I don't know how Art Scroll is translating Agma.
Right.
How do you have it there, Ruven? Okay, that's how I would normally translate it, Mel. Exactly. Okay, it's swamp. All right.
Agam Shishon. That's the swamp.
Swamp also.
Right.
Koren translated it lake. I didn't like that translation. Okay?
Here he says it's a fen, F-E-N.
F-E-N. Oh, they're getting fancy.
Well, I thought that could be a word that nobody knows.
You know what a fen is?
No.
You don't know. If we look up I didn't look it up, but if I remember correctly, the fen is a body of water, okay? And that term comes from Ireland, Scotland, Wales, someplace like that, where it's not, where that because, sorry, because there is a fog on the area, it's difficult to see where the shoreline is. And that would be true of a swamp, okay, as well.
But the swamp, the water is standing. I mean.
Well, wait, we're going to get to that. Okay, exactly.
That's what he says. A fen is a swampy lowland,
Okay,
wholly or partially open, covered with water.
right. Okay. So in any case, it is clearly a body of water where it's difficult to, I'm going to say difficult to determine the shoreline for whatever reason. Call it whatever. Okay. What happened? Says the Gemara. Ansaba Rav Shila l'debetayu, and Rav Shila allowed the wife to marry. Now it's important for us, sorry, to realize, to know very quickly who Rav Shila is. Rav Shila was a first generation Amora in Bavel. Okay, and he was a direct student of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. He was there before Rav even got to Bavel, but Shmuel was there. But Shmuel was generally willing to be modeh to Rav Shila. Okay, need to keep that historical element in mind as we go on with the story. Okay. So what happens? Rav, right? So normally we might have thought that this agma, however we translate it, should have been an area, okay, that if there's fog or if there's something else and you can't clarify exactly where the shoreline is, what would be the answer? It would be, should be considered a body of water, she,
Ein
ein
lahem
lehem sof. And therefore Rav Shila should not have permitted the marriage of this woman. Okay? Everybody with me. Let's go on now. Amar le Rav Shmuel. And Rav says to Shmuel, Ta nishamte. Let us come and put Rav Shila in a particular form of excommunication. Okay? Amar le, Shmuel responds, Nishlach le beresha. Let's send him a message, a note in advance. Shalchule, so they sent to him. And this is what the message was. Mayim she'en lehem sof. Ishto asura umuteret. How do you hold when it comes to a body of water that doesn't have borders? Is the wife forbidden or permitted? In other words, does he hold like Rabbanim or not? Shalach laho, he sent to them. Ishto asura, the wife is forbidden. So he does hold like the majority of Chachamim. Okay, not like Rabbi Meir. That's item one. Number two, va'agma de samke. And this body of water, this swamp fen and samke, mayim sheyesh lehem sof or mayim she'ein lehem sof? Do we say this is a body of water that has shoreline or it doesn't have a shoreline? Shalach laho. He sent to them the following. Mayim she'ein lehem sofu. It is a body of water that does not seem to have a shoreline. So
It's
next,
a shoreline that can be seen.
right, shoreline that can be seen. Easily visible shoreline. Okay. Umar, so now they ask as part of the letter, Mar and the master, Mai Tama Avad Hachi. So what was the reason that the master acted the way he did, permitting the woman to marry? Notice his answer now. Mit'a ta'ina. I made a mistake, he said. Ana savre kivan dekavu v'kaime. I was of the opinion, he said, that since this water could have carried him away, kemayim sheyesh lehem sof dami. Okay, right? That it was like a water that does have an end, a shoreline. Velohi, that's not the case. Kevan deika gale imur gale ashpelu. Okay, in other words, since the water was gathered together and stagnant, that's what the kavu v'kaime
Right.
really means,
It was stagnant, so then.
right? I thought, therefore, it's one thing. However, he says, since there are waves there, all right, and the waves it's the waves that could have carried him away. Therefore, I should have defined it as mayim she'ein lehem sof. Okay, so since Shmuel made the recommendation to wait and not immediately excommunicate him,
Right.
okay, but to send him the letter, Kare Shmuel alei de Rav, Shmuel called Rav by the following, Lo yu'unel et tzaddik kol on. In other words, the fact that he waited is to his credit, and he congratulates him. And the opposite is true. Kare Rav alei de Shmuel, and Rav then complimented Shmuel with a pasuk, Uchua berov yoetz. The fact that he gave such valid and worthwhile advice was to his benefit. Okay? All right. Let's go on now. Tanya, we have a new brighter, new story. Amar Rabbi says, Rebbe, Maaseh b'shnei b'nei Adam. We have an incident where there were two men, Michmarin murin. And these two men were spreading nets,
Yes.
okay, while fishing. Biyardain in the Jordan. Okay, and what happened? V'nichnas echad mehem lemechila shel dagim. And one of them went into a cave that had a pond of fish in it. Okay, that's the translation I found. Okay, v'shak achama, and the sun set. V'lo ra'a pitcha shel mechila, and he did not see the opening of the cave. V'sha'ha chavero kadesha tetzei nafsho, and his colleague then waited enough time where he would have assumed that since he didn't come out, he could have died. Uba v'hodia b'toch beito, and he went back and informed his household. Lemachar zarcha chama, the next day the sun shone. V'hikir pitcha shel mechila, and he recognized the opening of the cave. Uba umatzah hesped gadol b'toch beito, and he came to his house and he saw there was a great deal of eulogizing going on in his home. Okay, and therefore, what does Rebbe say? Amar Rebbe, Kama gedolim divrei chachamim. How great are the words of the sages. Sha'amru, as they say, Mayim sheyesh lehem sof ishtomad muteret. When they make up this principle that water that
So,
has boundaries, the wife is okay. And if we don't, of course, see the body come out at any place or find the body, the wife is permitted to marry. She'ein lehem sof, if she doesn't, right, if doesn't have boundaries, ishto asura, wife is forbidden. Ihachi, if that's the case, mayim sheyesh lehem sof, nami lechush lemechila shel dagim. If we have a situation, says the Gemara, that we have a body of water that may have a shoreline, maybe there too we should be suspect that it could have some sort of cave of a pond of fish, and therefore that would be the problem. B'mayim sheyesh lehem sof mechila shel dagim lo shchicha. But the Gemara tells us with a body of water that has a shoreline, finding such a cave full with a pond inside a fish is not a common situation. Okay. Amar Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi now says, Hada Amrum Rabbanan. The fact that the rabbis say, Mayim she'en lehem sof ishto asura, that body of water without shoreline, or the visible and the visibility of the shoreline, the wife is forbidden. Hanimili be'inish ta'alma. That applies to people in general. Aval tsurba mirabanan lo. But the idea of it being a Talmud or a rabbinic authority, that's not the case. Why? I desalik kola itle. If when he came out, whether he came out, I was going to say dead or alive, okay, there would be publicity. It would be known. Okay? Okay. Velohi. But the Gemara challenges and disagrees with Rav Ashi's statement. That's not the case, says the Gemara. Lo shna inish ta'alma. There's no difference if it's a regular general person. Velo shna tsurba mirabanan. There's no difference if it was a rabbinic person. Di avad, after the fact, in. In other words, if the woman had already married, yes, we allow her to remain married to that second person. Lechatchila, but initially, lo. Initially, she should not get married. Tanya. And now we have another Braita. Amar Rabban Gamliel, says Rabban Gamliel. That's why I want you to see it's a lot of Agadata stories here. Pam echad hayiti mahalech b'sfina. One time I was traveling on a boat. V'ra'iti sfina achat shenishbara. And I saw another boat that had been broken up. V'hayiti mitzta'er al Tamid Chacham Shaba. And I was terribly distraught about a colleague, a sage that was on that boat. Umano, and who was it? Rabbi Akiva. It was Rabbi Akiva. Ukashe aliti biyabasha, and when I came on to dry land, bayaviyashav v'dan lefanai bahalacha. It turns out he came, he sat, and he discussed halacha with us. Amarti lo, and I said to him, Bani mi ha'elcha, my son, who lifted you up? Okay, in other words, how did you get saved? Amarli, he said to me, Daf shel sfinan is the mainly. There was a
This is what
board.
Mordechai was telling the
Yeah.
Daf.
All right, okay, that the board, there was a plank, okay, that he grabbed hold of a plank that was floating, and the Daf saved him. That's the message, right?
Meir
Okay.
Shapiro used it to learn.
Right? What?
Meir
Shapiro got
Shapiro,
this
he's
tomorrow.
one that started the
Yeah.
Daf Yomi.
Mm-hmm.
It's important to having a Daf.
That's right.
Right? Shel sfinan is the mainly. A plank saved me. V'chol gal v'gal shaba alai na'aneti lo roshi. And every wave that passed over me, I was able to raise my head holding on to the plank. Okay? Which has a separate issue, but we won't get into it right now. Mikan amru chachamim, from here the sages say, im yavo rishaim al adam, yena'anea lo rosho. It says the sages, if somebody wicked, bad, bothers a person, he should lift up his head. In other words, he should try to rise above the difficulty. Okay? Amarti ba'ota sha'a, kama gedolim divrei chachamim. And I said at that time, how great are the words of the sages, Shamru, mayim sheyesh lahem sof, water that has shoreline muteret, the woman is permitted. Mayim she'en lahem sof, asura, water where there is no visible shoreline, prohibited.
It's a sure.
All right, asura, prohibited. Right.
And
Okay,
the fact that Rabbi Akiva was saved is a ness. I mean,
Right.
more.
okay. New story, another bright. Tanya says the brighter. Amar Rabbi Akiva. So he's going to tell a similar story. Pam echad hayiti malech b'sfina, v'ra'iti sfina achad shemitarefet b'mayim. One time I was traveling on a boat, and I saw another boat that was sinking in the water, in the sea. V'hayiti mitzta'er al tamid chacham shaba. And I was distressed because of the sage that was on it. Umano, and who was it? Rabbi Meir. It was Rabbi Meir. Kshaliti lemedinat Kaputkia, and when I reached the land of Kaputkia, Cappadocia, Bav yashav v'dan lefanai b'halacha. He came and sat and discussed the halacha with us. Amarti lo, and I said to him, Bani mi ha'elcha. I said, my son, who raised you up? Amarli, he said, Gal tardani lechavero, lechavero, ad sheheki ani liyabasha. Okay? A wave came, and it led me to the next wave, and it brought me to another wave until it brought me onto shore. In other words, the wave pushed me, okay, till I arrived on the shoreline. Amarti ba'ota sha'a, kam gdolim divrei chachamim she'amru mayim sheyesh lahem sof. How great are the words of the sages, where we say water that has a shoreline, okay? Ishto muteret, the wife is permitted. Mayim she'en lahem sof, water that doesn't have a shoreline visible. Ishto asura, the wife is forbidden. Okay, let's go on now. How are we doing time-wise? Okay, good. All right. Tanu Rabbanan, a new Braita. We keep going with this Agadas. All right, another Braita. Nafal leguvarayot. If somebody fell into a lion's den, right? Ein me'idin alav. We don't give testimony about him. Lechafura melea nechashim. If he fell into a pit full of snakes, va'akravim, and scorpions, me'idin alav. We do give testimony. In other words, he would not have survived. But the Gemara is going to raise a question. Rabbi Yehuda ben Batera Omer, he says, Af lechafura melea nechashim va'akravim. ein mi'idim alav. He says that even to a pit of snakes and scorpions, one does not give testimony to say that the person died. Chayshinan, why? Because we might suspect as we go over to the new Gemara, right? And we see it's long, but we'll go through it. Shemachabarhu, maybe he's a snake charmer. Okay? V'tanakama, and according to Tanakama, agav itzitza. But there's such an impact when he falls on the snakes and scorpions, maskele, they're going to harm him in any case.
Even if he is a snake charmer, it wouldn't help. Because
Well,
he's
doesn't
falling
help.
on him.
Right. Tana Rabbanan is a new Braita. Nafala toch kivshan ha'esh. Let's say he falls into a hot cauldron. Me'idim alav liyoreh. Okay, I'm sorry. Me'idim alav. We then say into a oven, hot oven, right? We do give testimony. Liyoreh meleya yayin v'shemen. Well, let's say he falls into a cauldron full of either wine or oil. Me'idim alav. We give testimony on him. Rishum Rabbi Acha, according to the view of Rabbi Acha. Amru, and the other sages said, Shel Shemen Me'idim alav. If the cauldron was full of oil, we do give testimony about him. Why? Mipnei shehu mav'ir. Because if he falls in, the contents of the cauldron are going to overflow. And that's going to cause that fire underneath it to burn up even more, to increase in its intensity, right? Shel yayin, but if it's a cauldron of wine, says Rabbi Acha, ein me'idin alav, mipnei shehu mechabeh. We don't give testimony about him because he claims that the wine is going to extinguish the fire underneath the cauldron. Amrulo, and they said to him, Tchilato mechabeh b'sofo ma'ir. Initially, it might extinguish, but ultimately,
The
it's
alcohol
right.
in the wine
Right.
will burn.
Burn, and therefore it will re-extinguish and get more intense. Okay. Amar Rabbi Meir, another Agadita. Ma'aseh be'achad shenafal lebor hagadol. Our Mishnah said about the incident of the man that fell into a large cistern and after 3 days came out.
Right.
Right? That's important to keep in mind. Says the Gemara, Tanya, we learn in a Braita, Amrulo the Rabbi Meir, that the other sages said to Rabbi Meir, Ein maskirin ma'asen nisim. You cannot use examples of miracles as your proof. My ma'asen nisim, what would be the miracle here? If you're going to say that it's that he wasn't able to eat or drink for the 3 days, b'haktuv. But isn't it written elsewhere, right? Namely, v'tsumu alai v'al tochlu v'al tishtu, that somebody is told to fast and not to eat or drink. Ele delo ni'em.
Esther said, don't eat and don't drink for 3
3
days.
days, right.
So you see, eating or drinking for 3 days is not
And not a sure
doesn't
sign
mean that
of,
you're going to die.
but he didn't sleep. That's the point. The Amar Rabbi Yochanan, as said by Rabbi Yochanan, Shavua shelo ishan shlosha yamin. If one takes a vow that I don't sleep for 3 days, malkin oto v'ishan la'alter. We give him malchus and he goes to sleep immediately. Rabbi Meir ma'itama, and Rabbi Meir, what was his reasoning? Amar Rav Kahana, explains Rav Kahana, kifin al gav kifin, that there were ledges. Okay, I'm going to use that word. We could have arches.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in a
Ledges, you're right.
right, ledges I think is a little more appropriate, right? Right. The Rabbanan and the rabbis argued Deshai shahayu, that the ledges were perhaps smooth like marble, and therefore he wouldn't be able to stay on them. Okay, but Rabbi Meir argues back. Okay, Efshar delo masri. Okay, it's impossible. Okay, that he couldn't grasp hold of it, v'niyem porta, and at least sleep a little bit. Tanu Rabbanan, another brighter. Okay, Maaseh b'bito shel Nechunya chofer shichin. This is an incident regarding the daughter of Nechunya, who was a well digger. Okay, Shenafla labor hagadol, she fell into a large cistern. Uba'u, and they went, the townspeople, v'hodiu l'Rebbe Chanina ben Dosa. And they went to Chanina ben Dosa, who we know was a, so to speak, miracle worker, okay, for that he would pray for her. Sha'a Rishona Amar Lehem Shalom. The first hour, he said to him, she's okay. Shniya Amar Lehem Shalom. Second hour, okay, she's still okay. Shlishit Amar Lehem Alta. By the third hour, he said to them, she's out. She got out of the
She got out.
cistern. Right? Amarla. And they said to her, Biti, mihi elach, our daughter, well, how did you get up? Amra lo, and she said to him, Zachar sharechalim nizdamenli. There was a ram that happened to come by the cistern. V'zakein manhigo. And there was an old man that was leading him. Amrulo naviata. And so they said to Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, are you a prophet? Amar lehem, he responded to them, as we know from, what was it, Amos? Lo navi anochi velo ben navi anochi. Neither am I a prophet, nor the son of a prophet, right? Ela davar shehat tzadik mitasek bo yikashel bo zaro, but something that a righteous person like Nechunya, who digs wells.
And
Why?
she fell into the well that her father had dug.
Yeah, you got that? All right. Okay. In any case, the point is, since he does mitzvahs of digging wells, particularly for the pilgrims that are coming to Eretz
It's
Yisrael for
Yisrael.
the, okay,
Right.
then shouldn't his progeny be safe? However, Amar Rebbe Abba, says Rebbe Abba, Afal Pichein mate beno b'tzama. Nevertheless, his son died from thirst. Shneamar v'svivav nishara ma'od. Okay, as we say, that those encompassing one are under close scrutiny. Okay, I use that phraseology. Melamed shakadosh baruch hu medakdek im svivav kechut hashara. Comes to tell us that the Kadosh Baruch Hu examines the behavior of those that are close to him, and it's on a thin wire,
So
a thin
it's
line.
possible his daughter was saved and the son was not.
Right.
That's the Kutasara.
Right.
That's what
Yeah.
he's starting.
Mhm. Rabbi Chanina Amar, he says, Umei Hacha. And maybe from here, Al Ma'aratz Besod Kedoshim Rabbah V'Nora Al Kol Seviva. So he cites a different pasuk, but again, implying that Hashem has a more stringent approach to those that are close. All right, we get to a new Mishnah. Okay. So our new Mishnah then is going to come back to the issue of giving testimony. Afilu shama min hanashim omrot meit ish ploni. Even if we hear, says the Mishnah, from women, okay, maybe that so and so died. Dio, it's enough. Okay, in other words, maybe it's gossip, or maybe it's okay, vibisha, right? Okay. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, says Rabbi Yehuda, Afilu shama min hatinokot. Omrim, hare anu hochim lispod v'likbor et ish ploni. Even if the children say, right, we're going to go and give eulogies and bury Mr. So-and-so. Okay? Bein shehu mitkavein, uvein she'eno mitkavein. Regardless of whether it's their intent to tell it, I'm going to say outright, or
As
whether
wit-
it's
as a testimony.
okay, or whether they're just talking among themselves, so to
Gotcha.
speak, right? Okay. Ben shehu mitkavein uvein she'eno mitkavein. However, what happens, says the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba says as follows: Be Yisrael. If we're talking about a Jew giving the testimony, giving the remarks, Afal pi shehu mitkavein, even though it's his intent to tell you. Okay? Uba oved kochavim, or some texts have uvagoy, right? Im hayam mitkavein, aid ein eduto edut. If it was his intent to clearly tell you, we do not trust his testimony. It's not valid testimony. Okay? What happens? New Gemara. V'dilma lo azle. Okay? Perhaps they didn't go. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav Shmuel. Maybe the children didn't go to the funeral to eulogize. De ka'amre, as they were saying, Harenu ba'in milispod umilikvor et ish
Now
ploni.
they're saying they're going, they're
But
coming
maybe it's the
back
fact that they're coming back from saying, oh, we went to do eulogies and
for so-and-so.
etc. so and so. So the Gemara has an interesting insight here. V'dilma kamtza ba'al mashchivle. Okay, maybe they buried a grasshopper or an insect and they were just pretending. Okay, that was the case. Va'asikule al shmei, and they used the
Called it
name of
Mr.
that
So-and-so.
person to recognize
Yeah,
what they were doing,
right.
right? The ka'amri, as they say, kain v'chein rabbanan havu hata. But it's a situation where the children will say, Rabbi so-and-so and so-and-so were there. Kain v'chein safdane. The following havu hatam, that the eulogizers, remember they had, so to speak, professional eulogizers back then, and they were there. Okay, so back to our Mishnah. Our Braita actually said, our Mishnah, Ube'oved kochavim im hayamit kavein v'chulei, that if the Gentile gave direct testimony, it's not to be believed. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, he says, Lo shanu ela shenitkavein lahatir. What we mean is that we don't trust that testimony if his intent was to permit the woman to marry. Aval mitkavein la'id eduto, but if he came to give testimony directly on the death of the person, okay, eduto edut, then that is valid testimony. Hechi yadinin, how do we know? Asks the Gemara. Amar Rav Yosef, says Rav Yosef, Bala Beit Din va'amar. He comes to the court, and says as follows: Ish ploni mate, hesiu et ishto. Mr. Abramovitz will use that example. Died, okay, marry off his wife. Zehu nitkavein lahatir. That's an example of coming to permit the woman to marry. Mate stam, if he simply said, oh, I know that Abramovitz died. Zehu nitkavein la'edut. That's an example that he's giving valid testimony. Itmar nami, and about this the following was also said. Amar Reish Lakish, says Reish Lakish, Lo shanu ela shenitkavein lahatir. They did not teach it this about the testimony of the Gentile, except in regards to his effort to permit the woman. Okay, aval mitkavein laha'id, But if his intent is to give valid testimony, eduto edut, that's valid. Amar le Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan responds, Lo kach haya ma'aseh ba'oshaya barabi. Wasn't that there a similar incident there with Oshaya, right? Shehetiram im shmonim v'chamisha zakinim, that Rabbi Oshaya permitted a woman to marry before 85 elders. Amar lahem, and he said to them, Lo shanu elish nitkavein lahatir. Okay, know that we don't trust that testimony when it's only for the permission to permit her marriage. Avel mitkavein laha'id, but if his intent was simply to give testimony,
that he
eduto,
died.
right? Eduto edut. It's valid testimony. What happened? V'lo hodulo chachamim. But the sages did not agree and acknowledge him. Ela matnitin dekatani ube'oved kochavim im haya mitkavein ein eduto edut. But rather, our Mishnah is teaching us that with regard to the Gentile, if his intent, okay, is clear to it's not a valid testimony. Heichi mishkachat la. How do we determine this? Ubemasiach lefi tumo, when he says it sort of offhandedly. So the Gemara goes on.
And it gives an example of
Right.
offhandedness.
Ki hahu dahava ka'amar va'azir. Like we have the situation where a certain person came and went, man ika bei chavai. Okay, and who do we say he was? Man ika bei chavai. Who do we say what happened with chavai? What happens with chavai? Shechiv chavai. Chavai passed away. Okay. In other words, has anybody seen so and so, etc.? No, because he passed away. All right. V'insba Rav Yosef lebatayu, and Rav Yosef permitted the wife to marry. Another example. Hahu dahavika amar va'azir voy lev leparsha. Okay, Zeriza dahava b'pampadita. Okay, another person who came. Woe to the, I'll call it warrior, okay, or hero, okay, to the strong, famous hero who had come from Pompadita because he died. The Insaba Rav Yosef, and Rav Yosef permitted marriage. The Itema Rava the Debetayu, and others say it was Rava who permitted the wife to remarry. Okay. Another example, Hahu, another case where there was a non-Jew, the Havika Amar Va'azil, who came and who said and came, Man Ika Bei Chasa. Okay, what has happened in the house of Chasa? Tava Chasa, Chasa drowned. Amar Rav Nachman, says Rav Nachman taking an oath. Elohim, by God's name. Achlu kivaye lach lechasa. Or maybe he could have said, the fish devoured chasa. Midibure the Rav Nachman, from the way Rav Nachman said it. Okay? Right? Azla de beitayu, the chasa ve'insaba. Can we see then that the wife of chasa is able to go and remarry? Velo amrula velo midi, and they did not say anything to her that was inappropriate. Right? Amar Rav Ashi, says Rav Ashi, Shmamina. What do we learn from this? Ha da'amur Rabbanan mayim she'ein lehem sof, where the rabbi said that the water does not have any borders, any shoreline. Ishto asura, that the woman is prohibited. Hani mili lechatchila. This is initially. Aval inasi, but if she's married, lo mafkinin la mine. We don't remove her from the second husband. Okay? Ika da amre. And there are those who say, Unsaba Rav Nachman ledebetai. That it was Rav Nachman that permitted the wife to remarry. Okay? Amar Chasa Gavra Rabba Ite. And this could have been the thinking of, they're wondering, of Rav Nachman. Chasa, after all, is he's a well-known personality in town, right? Ita Desali, if it's such that he would have come out, in other words, Kala Eat Leila Milta, then there would have been publicity. People would have known about it, right? Velohi, and that's not the case. Lo Shana Gavra Rabba, Lo Shana Lav Gavra Rabba. There's no difference whether he was a well-known or important person or not a well-known or important person. Diavad, if after the fact that she's married, and yes, she remains married. L'chadchila, but initially, lo, that's not the case. Okay, we'll go just a little bit further. Hahu oved kochavim, and there was a certain Gentile, Dahava ka'amar leili Yisrael, okay, who said to a Jew the following: Katol aspasta, okay, I want you to cut this particular grain, vishade lechavaya b'shabta, and I want you to give it as feed to my animals on Shabbos. In other words, cut the grain and feed my animals, ve'ilo, and if not, katilna lach kedekatilna leploni bar Yisrael. If not, I will kill you the same way I killed Ploni so-and-so. All right? The Amrele, why, as I said to him, Bishili li Kadira b'Shabbat, because when I said to him to cook me a pot of food on Shabbos, Velo Bashili, and he didn't cook it for me, Vikat lite, and I killed him. And that's where we're going to stop. Stay tuned tomorrow. Okay. Okay. Shows you to think that that's why it's important. I'm going to put up swimming lessons, right?
That's why the Gemara says the father should teach the son.
Exactly. That, I thought of that in both those examples of Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Meir. That if they had known how to swim,